I want to thank everyone for coming here today. I thought that the way that today would work was I would start with a few words, and then whoever feels compelled to come up and speak, feel free. After we say a few words, we'll have a picture in unity that we can later share. And then I will say a few words for all of those who were lost. So again, thank you for joining me today. I want to extend a special thanks to Dean Kulik, Class President Caitlin, Will, and all the other faculty and students who helped mobilize at such a rapid pace. The number of people here today should testify to the imminent need to address today's issue. On Wednesday, February 14th, 2018, I received a group text between my best friends from high school. Active shooter at Douglas. Time and time again, we have read the news headlines and received alerts of another mass shooting. We cringe and ache, but immediately sigh in relief that it was not our school, not our town, not our home. On Valentine's Day, the International Day of Love, a young sister cowered underneath a desk as she heard the shattering sounds, pop, pop, pop. Not until 3 hours later would her brother hear the sound of a broken voice. That sister was Kaylee, and her brother was me. She was safe, but her life forever changed. The lives of students at Marjory Stoneman Douglas have been interrupted. In order to minimize psychological trauma, students are asked to step out of this period of interruption and regain normalcy as quickly as possible. But if your life is normal being a student, and we live in a country where every student now goes to school wondering if this day might be their last, this creates a life of chronic fear. April 20th, 1999, Littleton, Colorado. 12 students and 1 teacher massacred at a school shooting at Columbine. Addressing the tragedy, President Bill Clinton remarked, "Perhaps now, America would wake up to the dimensions of this challenge." No gun legislation was passed. April 16th, 2007, Blacksburg, Virginia. 32 students and teachers killed at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University. The national background check was strengthened. December 14th, 2012, Newton, Connecticut. 20 children aged 6 to 7 years old and 6 other adults fell victim to mass gun violence at Sandy Hook Elementary. After meeting with families for hours, President Barack Obama sat alone in a classroom before attending a prayer vigil. "This is our first task," he remarked, "caring for children. It's our first job. If we don't get that right, we don't get anything right. That's how, as a society, we will be judged." New York Representative Carolyn McCarthy followed. "This time is different because now we have a president who is standing behind us." No gun legislation was passed. October 1st, 2015, Rottenburg, Oregon. 9 more students killed at a campus shooting in Umpqua Community College. No gun legislation was passed. June 12, 2016, 49 people fell victim to a shooting in an Orlando nightclub. September 1st, 2017, 50 people died at a mass shooting at a concert in Las Vegas. November 5th, 2017, 26 churchgoers were shot to death in Sutherland Springs, Texas. No gun legislation was passed. And on Wednesday, February 14th, 2018, in Parkland, Florida, 14 students and 3 teachers were killed at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. But this time, things will change. Tonight, CNN is hosting a town hall entitled Stand Up. The students of Stoneman Douglas demand action, which will air live at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So far, Florida Representative Ted Deutsch, Senator Bill Nelson, and Senator Marco Rubio have accepted an invitation to participate in the town hall. The Parkland students remain MSD strong. This week, more than 100 MSD students will make the 6-hour trip to the state capital, Tallahassee, Florida, where they plan to disperse into groups to speak with individual legislators. In addition, the MSD students have planned a March for Our Lives on March 24th in Washington, D.C. Their message is clear. You're either with the students or against us. As stated in the mission statement, we can no longer wait to tackle issues of school safety and gun control reform. There are other efforts too. The Women's March has called for students and teachers to walk out of schools on March 14th to protest gun violence. This will be 1 month from the Parkland shooting and will last 17 minutes, 1 minute for each life lost. The Network for Public Education has arranged a National Day of Action on Friday, April 20th, the 19th anniversary of Columbine. Instructions read, we want students to attend school and then promptly walk out at 10 a.m. Sit outside your schools and peacefully protest. Make some noise. Voice your thoughts. We are students. We are victims. We are change. To the Tufts healthcare community, we are teachers and we are educators, but let us for naught, we are lifelong students. I have asked you to come here today in the sea of white coats, which is a reflection of not just physicians, but the entire healthcare community at large. I am calling to action a paradigm that has been profoundly under-addressed. Gun violence is a public health crisis. More than 30,000 people are killed with guns in the US each year, a higher death count than that of AIDS, and about the same number due to car crashes and liver disease. But unlike AIDS or car crashes, the government doesn't treat gun injuries or deaths as a public health threat. When a new infectious disease enters the community, such as the Zika virus, we have a mechanism to anticipate it, to track it, to mobilize every force available to prevent its transmission. We cannot say the same about gun violence. Gun violence should be no different than the approach we take to cancer, heart disease, or diabetes. The government spends only about $22 million a year on research into gun violence. This dwarfs in comparison to funding of other major health threats, such as cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, where funding is in excess of $10 billion. I'd like to bring your attention to the Dickey Amendment, which was lobbied for by the National Rifle Association and passed in 1996. The law effectively prevents the CDC from studying the effect of gun violence on the American public. After the mass murder in Orlando, efforts to repeal the amendment were refused by Congress, who defended their argument stating, not enough research has been conducted. Yet they are the very power withholding this research. Our next step as a community involves a deeper forum between Tufts hospital chiefs and community experts in this field. Please stay tuned for future news. This speech is not intended to propose a single unified solution. Rather, I hope that you can leave with this understanding. Gun violence is a public health crisis that takes thousands of lives each year. And we, as future and current health providers, have a duty to address it. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite anybody else who would like to share any words.
I'm stepping forward just so that others will as well. I've taught many of you, only one lecture, but I've taught you. And these were very moving words, and I won't reach that level of eloquence. Many of you know I'm also an artist, and I just recently had a show in Toronto, my hometown, showing work that I made with gunpowder separated into carbon, sulfur, and potassium nitrate as artist pigments, covering scenes of violence. And the work culminated in a piece called In Memoriam, which had children's character letters for spelling out Columbine, Aurora, and Sandy Hook. And that piece, and those were made with crystalline chemicals, but the piece was decorated with 137 small pieces of writing in red letters for every school that had had a mass shooting since Sandy Hook, when this work was made in 2015. Since that time, that list has more than doubled. So it's just my statement of how I can deal with this, and that something has to be done. So I reach out in the ways I can, and I encourage all of you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Taryn, and thank you for highlighting that this is a public health crisis. And it's like all public health crises, the politics are as prominent as the public health arguments, and unfortunately, the dollars behind those arguments are usually not on the public health side. The NRA has worked very hard to frame the gun violence crisis as a Second Amendment assault. Responsible gun ownership is really not at odds with what they're now calling common sense gun control. So as future practitioners of health, and I think there are some public health students here as well, I hope you will sort of keep in the forefront of your minds what you can do. As physicians, you have a lot of bully pulpit power. I think people think that physicians understand public health problems and potential solutions. And for the public health students, this is your work. And as Taryn said, this is the beginning of youth action on this issue. I have to say, as an older person, it's really exciting to see youth taking up these complex and seemingly intractable causes and putting their considerable creativity and strength behind them. So we're counting on you.
So earlier this morning, Dean Kulik and I were talking about what we could do, and we feel in many ways as frustrated and helpless as you do. And I think the one thing that we can do is look very hard at our curriculum to make sure that each one of you are equipped with the tools to help address this problem. Because as I see all of you here, you are going to influence the lives of millions and millions of people. So if we make sure that you have what it takes to educate your patients about this issue, then I think we will move towards the direction of helping to stop this problem. So keep pressuring us. A lot of things we do here are influenced by what you think and what you say, and I'd keep the pressure on to make sure we deliver on what we'd like to do for you.
So we're all lifelong students, but we're also lifelong teachers. And one thing that I've realized, I'm also from Florida, and my family, my social media, my friends, and people that I know have been obviously blowing up my social media with arguments and with discussions on the issue. And one thing that I've come to realize is that a lot of our peers, a lot of our family, a lot of our friends, they don't know the full story. They don't know everything there is to know. And as physicians and future teachers and current teachers, we actually know a lot of what they don't. We know that there is more to gun violence than just murder. There's suicide, and it happens every day. It's top 5. Actually, if you look at the CDC's data, top 5 deaths by injury are suicide by firearm. People will argue that if you take away guns, which no one is arguing, but if you control them, people will find other ways to do harm. But if you look at the data, when you look at other weapons that people use, they're at the bottom of the statistics. It's just not true. You look at the information, the small, unfortunately small amount of information we have, it's just not true. So if there is one thing that I've been thinking about for a long time now, is how do I assume my role as a medical student and help my community? What role do I have to play? And that answer has gotten more and more clear over the years, that it's really to bring some light to the issues that I shouldn't expect them to know about. You know, we're the ones who come to school for years upon years to learn these things, and we owe it to our friends, family, and people in our states, towns, and communities to be the voice of, you know, you might not know about this, I don't expect you to, but let me show you our side of the story. And that's the one thing I can encourage you guys to do, because I know one of the most difficult things to do in these situations is to look into yourself and say, what can I do? And that's at least what I've realized I can do.
I just want to echo what was said, especially the point about being lifelong students and especially lifelong teachers. You know, we live in a democracy, and our policies are ultimately indicative of who we are as a people. So if you didn't know what the Dickey Amendment was before today, if you don't know the history of the NRA essentially banning research into gun violence, I just want to say it's never too late to have an opinion. And you shouldn't feel bad about not knowing up until now. And all I'm trying to say is you should do the research, and you should arm yourself with the knowledge that you need to take down the illogical arguments that are made in defense of the policies that are standing right now. Because that's what it is. It's illogical arguments from people and elected representatives who have pushed these policies. And make no mistake, these policies weren't just put in place by one person or two people. These policies were voted for. So our policies are indicative of who we are, and if we want to change that, we need to change the thinking at a broader, greater level. And you can play your part by arming yourself with the knowledge that you need to educate people.
Thank you all for being here today, and for those who chose to speak. Again, stay tuned for the next event that we will have. I now invite you to share a moment to commemorate the lives lost at Marjory Stoneman Douglas. There's one balloon for each of the lives lost. And as I repeat their names, let us hold those names dearly in our hearts. Meadow Pollock, 18 years old. Martin Duque, 14 years old. Jamie Gutenberg, 14 years old. Joaquin Oliver, 17 years old. Scott Beagle, 35 years old. Alyssa Al-Hadef, 14 years old. Aliana Petty, 14 years old. Aaron Weiss, 37 years old. Chris Hickson, 37 years old. Gina Montalto, 14 years old. Nicholas Dwaret, 17 years old. Peter Wang, 15 years old. Luke Boyer, 15 years old. Carmen Shentra, 16 years old. Kara Lowren, 14 years old. Alexander Shachter, 14 years old. Helena Ramsey, 17 years old. Thank you all. So this concludes the part where we'll be speaking. If you have any ideas for where you would like us for the picture, we could arrange. Okay.